Imagine you could be beaten to death by your own friends, not your enemies, not strangers, your brothers, the men you ate with, slept next to, and fought beside every single day. And the reason? You took a nap. That's not a metaphor. That's not an exaggeration. In the Roman army, falling asleep on duty was a capital offense. And the punishment was so brutal, so calculated, and so psychologically devastating that historians still talk about it 2,000 years later. But here's what nobody tells you. It wasn't just about punishment. The entire system around sleep and vigilance inside the Roman military was one of the most sophisticated pieces of human engineering ever designed. And once you understand how it worked, you'll never look at discipline the same way again. Let's go back, way back. Picture a Roman military camp. It's 2 in the morning, the air is cold. Somewhere in northern Europe, or the deserts of Syria, or the swamps along the Rhine, the fires have burned low. Most of the camp is silent. 10,000 men sleeping in organized rows of leather tents, each tent holding exactly 8 soldiers. But not everyone is sleeping. Along the walls of the camp, standing at wooden watchtowers and wooden gates, are the sentries. Young men. Tired men. Men who marched 15 to 20 miles that day, carrying 60 to 80 pounds of equipment. Their feet are blistered. Their shoulders ache, and they have been standing in the dark for hours. Their one job, stay awake, stay alert, watch. Because if an enemy scout found this camp unguarded, 10,000 men could die in their sleep. One tired soldier, 10,000 lives. That's the math the Roman army was working with. And they built an entire system to make sure that math never failed them. Here's how it worked. The Roman night was divided into 4 watches. Each watch lasted roughly 3 hours. The Latin word was vigilia, and every single night, without exception, the watches rotated across different units. No soldier knew too far in advance exactly when his watch would fall. That was intentional. Predictability breeds complacency. Unpredictability keeps you sharp. But knowing your watch time wasn't enough. The Romans needed a way to verify that sentries were actually awake and actually at their posts. Not just present, not just standing there with their eyes half closed, actually alert, actually doing their job. So they invented something brilliant. Each night, a tesserarius was assigned to each century. The tesserarius was essentially the watchword officer. His job was to take a small wooden tablet called a tessera to the officer of the watch. On that tablet was a secret password for the night. This password was passed from unit to unit across the entire camp. Then, throughout the night, officers would walk the perimeter. They would approach each sentry. They would ask for the watchword. If the sentry gave the correct word, they moved on. If the sentry hesitated, stumbled, or gave the wrong word, they knew something was wrong. But if the sentry didn't respond at all, then everyone knew exactly what had happened. And now the real part of this story begins. The punishment for falling asleep on duty in the Roman army had a name, fustuarium. And once you hear what it involved, you will understand why Roman sentries did everything in their power to stay awake. Everything. When a soldier was found asleep at his post, he was brought before his unit the next morning. Not before a court, not before a general, before his own contubernium, his own 8-man tent group, his brothers. The tribunus, the commanding tribune, would then tap the guilty soldier with a staff. A single tap. That was the formal signal, the legal beginning of what came next. And then every single man in the unit was given a stone or a heavy piece of wood, and they beat him, sometimes to death. And even when the man survived, which was rare, his life in the army was effectively over. No other soldier would eat with him, sleep near him, or speak to him. He was an outcast, a ghost. Think about that for a moment. The Romans didn't use anonymous executioners. They didn't hide the punishment behind closed doors. They forced the men closest to you to be the instruments of your punishment. They made it intimate. They made it witness. They made it impossible to forget. And that was the point. Because the Roman military understood something that modern psychologists would confirm centuries later. Public punishment within a group doesn't just punish one person. It warns every person. When you watch your tent mate beaten for falling asleep, you don't just feel sympathy. You feel fear. And that fear is exactly what keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, when every part of your body is begging you to close your eyes. But let's slow down here for a second, because there's a human side to this that gets lost when we just talk about punishment. Think about what it actually felt like to be a Roman sentry. You are 19, maybe 20 years old. You signed up for 25 years of military service. 25 years. You won't be able to legally marry until you're discharged. You can't own property the way civilians do. You live in a tent with 7 other men. You eat grain porridge almost every day. When you march, you carry a javelin, a shield, a sword, a pickaxe, a cooking pot, personal rations, and your own tent section. 60 to 80 pounds every single day, and now it's 2 in the morning. You've been standing at this gate for 2 hours. Your eyes are burning. The cold is biting through your woolen cloak. Your legs feel like stone. And somewhere in the dark, you know an officer is walking toward you. And you know you have to be ready. You have to have the word. You have to stand straight. You cannot afford to drift. So what did Roman soldiers actually do to stay awake? Some would shift their weight constantly, moving from foot to prevent their bodies from settling into sleep. Some would quietly recite prayers or military oaths under their breath. There is evidence that soldiers sometimes quietly sang, not loudly, not enough to wake the camp, but just enough to keep their own minds active. And the cold helped actually. The Romans positioned watch posts in exposed areas on purpose, not just for visibility, but because the cold kept men alert in a way that warmth never would. The system was designed around human weakness. It didn't pretend soldiers were machines. It acknowledged that they were tired, young, scared men. And it built structures specifically to counteract the biological pull toward sleep. And it worked. For centuries, it worked. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The Romans didn't apply fustuarium universally. There was a tiered system of punishment depending on the severity and the circumstances. A soldier who nodded off briefly but was caught by a fellow soldier before the formal inspection might receive flogging instead, or extra duties, or reduced rations. The Romans were ruthless, but they were not stupid. They understood that killing every tired 19-year-old would hollow out their army in a generation. What they reserved fustuarium for was the clear, flagrant, undeniable case. The soldier found slumped against the wall, the sentry who couldn't be woken, the man who had made a choice, even unconsciously, that endangered 10,000 lives. That's when the full weight of Roman discipline came down. And it's worth noting the threat alone was usually enough. Compare this to other ancient armies. The Greek city-states had strict military codes, but punishments were often left to individual commanders and varied wildly. Persian armies were massive, but relied heavily on external rewards and fear of the king rather than internalized unit discipline. Carthaginian forces were largely mercenary, which meant loyalty was transactional, not cultural. The Roman system was different because it was systemic. It wasn't about one angry general. It was baked into the structure of every single unit, every single night, across the entire empire. A legionnaire in Britain and a legionnaire in Egypt followed the same watch system, the same Tessera protocol, the same standard of accountability. That consistency is what made the Roman army function like a machine for nearly 1,000 years. It wasn't talent. It wasn't superior weapons. It was systems. It was the deliberate engineering of human behavior through routine, accountability, and consequences. And sleep, of all things, was one of the places where that engineering was most clearly visible. So what actually happened to Roman soldiers who fell asleep on duty? Sometimes they survived with lifelong scars, physical and psychological, permanently outcast from the brotherhood that defined their entire world. Sometimes they didn't survive at all, and the men who beat them, the friends who carried out the punishment, they carried that with them too. It was also part of the design, to make the cost of failure felt not just by the guilty, but by everyone around him. This was not cruelty for its own sake. This was architecture, human architecture, built to keep an empire standing in the dark, in the cold, in the exhausted hours before dawn, when the walls of civilization were thinnest. The Roman army didn't ask its soldiers to be superhuman. It just made the consequences of being human, of being tired, of being weak, too terrible to accept. And for nearly 1,000 years, that was enough. Here's what I want you to think about. We live in a world that treats sleep deprivation almost as a badge of honor. I only slept 4 hours. I'd pulled an all-nighter. But the Romans understood something we seem to have forgotten. That a tired guard is no guard at all. That the moment you let exhaustion make your decisions, something breaks. In an army, in a team, in a life, the Roman sentry standing in the cold at 2 in the morning wasn't just protecting a camp. He was holding the line between order and chaos, and the system around him made sure he knew it. What would happen if we built our own systems with that kind of intentionality? Something to think about. And if you want to go deeper into what daily life actually looked like for these men, the food they ate, the smells they lived with, the strange rituals that got them through each day, there's a video coming that will answer every question you didn't know you had. Don't miss it.